Hello and welcome to episode 45 of Charlotte Mecklenburg History with Dan Morrill. Today is Sunday, May 23rd, 2021, and I am Dan's daughter, Mary Dana, here with Dan. Hey, Dad.
Hey,
Hey,
Mary Dana. Hello,
good to see
everybody.
you. My light just burned out. And so we haven't done a podcast in a while, but we wanted to do one today for the second anniversary of Preserve Mecklenburg. That's exciting.
That is very true. That is very true.
Right. And you've been very
Ready
busy.
for me to
That's one reason we haven't done a podcast.
That's ridiculous. Well, that's right.
You stay busy.
It's been, but very fulfillingly busy, I might say. So
Oh,
I'm
that's
not complaining.
right. No complaints there. So,
No complaint.
all right. Well, I'm just going to let you start talking.
Well, it's interesting, Mary Dana. I heard a sermon recently about ending and beginning. And it is true that when there's an end, there's a beginning. Sometimes when something comes to an end, it opens up opportunities for something to start. And I retired from the Charlotte Mecklenburg Historic Landmarks Commission in December 2019 after I had done it, I think, for about 43 years. And I got involved with Preserve Mecklenburg, and it has been a new beginning. And it's been extremely rewarding. And it's amazing what a private nonprofit group can do. It's not that the public agencies don't do good work, they do, but they use taxpayers' money. And because of that, there are a lot of rules and regulations that govern using taxpayers' money when you're using private money. And thanks to all of those who have watched these podcasts and contributed funds, because the private money enables us to do amazing things. We are 2 years old, Preserve Mecklenburg, or we call it PMI. And I wanted to go over some of the main projects we've done. And as usually the case, as you know, Mary Dana, I'm one to sort of go off down a rabbit hole once in a while.
Yeah,
But
I have to
anyway,
pull you out of the rabbit hole. That's my job. That's what
yeah,
people
yeah, yeah,
told
yeah.
me.
That's what. Well, the first thing I want to talk about the first thing we did was with the Excelsior Club. Now, the Excelsior Club is on Beatties Ford Road. It was in a very deteriorated condition in 2019. There were many people wondering whether anything could happen. And the National Trust for Historic Preservation had placed the Excelsior Club on the 10 most endangered properties list in the United States. And they needed a private group to be a local sponsoring group, which essentially meant that we would deal with publicity and marketing, hold public events, with the hope of trying to bring attention to the Excelsior Club. And I think it sort of indicates one thing that's very true of Preserve Mecklenburg, and that is that we believe all elements of our community that have participated in its evolution through time are important. And we, of course, did have a major event at the Charlotte Museum of History, and Preserve Mecklenburg is very appreciative to the Charlotte Museum of History for providing a space to have a big media event. We got a lot of publicity, and that contributed to drawing the attention of a developer from California named Darius Anderson, who has a real interest in African American legacy and culture. And he has bought the property. Now, the exact way that the building is going to be preserved or how parts of it might be preserved is still under discussion, but there's no question that it is going to be saved. And the legacy of the Excelsior Club is going to continue to be part of Charlotte's future. And, you know, I could go on and on about how important the Excelsior Club was. Among other things, it was a major meeting place during the Civil Rights Movement, and leaders of the African American community would often gather there to discuss their strategy to advance the issue of equal rights within our community. So it's a very important building. The next thing, the photograph on the right at the top is the Stafford Log House. Now this is way out the plaza, just beyond 485. It is the only known only known structure, not just log structure, that we know was built to house enslaved people. Now, we mentioned before that slavery was a very large component of the economy of Mecklenburg County until the Civil War. Indeed, approximately 40% of the residents of Mecklenburg County in 1860 were enslaved. And this is the only structure that we know that's left. And of course, again, because of our commitment to preservation of all parts of the community, we believe that we had a responsibility for undertaking some emergency repairs to the building. The Historic Landmarks Commission let us know that the building was close to falling down. They, of course, again, because they're using taxpayers' money, would have to go through a rather lengthy process to make those repairs. And we, of course, undertook that, sent a crew out of volunteers, propped up the building and kept it in place. It's still there. In fact, now the Historic Landmarks Commission is processing this building for historic landmark designation. So again, you see that important element of teamwork that works with these local historic preservation agencies. So we did that. Now, the brick house that you see below, we've talked about this before. This is the Knowlton Shaw House. It's a colonial revival style house on Mecklenburg Avenue, very close to the Charlotte Country Club. And it was scheduled for demolition. In fact, the owner had acquired a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic Landmarks Commission and was therefore authorized after a year's delay to demolish the property. I've mentioned this before, but I think it is important for people to understand that if indeed something is designated as an historic landmark or it's in a local historic district, it can still be torn down with the only thing that the maximum thing that can be done short of eminent domain, which is very politically unlikely for a landmarks commission or a local historic district commission, is to impose a 1-year delay on demolition. They can't prevent it. Again, Preserve Mecklenburg went and got a 6-month exclusive assignable option to buy this property. I'll show you a plan later of exactly how we went about configuring the house for the future. But now the house is going to be saved. It's going to be part of a development known as Mecklenburg Park that has infill development surrounding the house. It's going to have a permanent preservation easement on the house held by Preserve Mecklenburg, and therefore it's not going to be destroyed. So literally, without Preserve Mecklenburg, this house would be gone. I mean, it wouldn't be part of the future. And
Yeah,
I'll show you some
we
more
went to
pictures
that
of that
reception a
later.
couple of weeks ago there that they had to celebrate.
We did, and I think was great. It was great to see so many people, and there were so many people. Rob Haney of Terra Nova of Greenville, South Carolina, is a developer. Ben Collins of the Salons Group was so fundamental in putting us in touch with Rob Haney. There were so many. Eric Gamble, who's a member of the board of Preserve Mecklenburg, also was an integral part in putting me in contact with Ben Collins. And the interesting thing is, many people think it's going to cost you a ton of money to save something. We paid $1 for our option to purchase. The other big colonial revival style house on the right, it was the home of Frank McNinch. Now, we had a long program on Frank McNinch, a big supporter of Prohibition, mayor of Charlotte during the Spanish influenza epidemic in 1918, 1919. Later, he served both in the Hoover and Roosevelt administrations. This house was built in 1925. Again, the owner of this house, he never did file for a certificate of appropriateness to demolish it, but he had placed the house on the market, and the decision as to what was going to happen with the house really depended on who was going to buy it. And many people would tear this house down. In fact, for reasons that I might get into a little bit later, this style of house, because it looked so much like a plantation house, even though it was built in 1925, has somewhat become less popular than it once was. We went to the owner, Caldwell Rhodes, who, without Caldwell Rhodes's cooperation and support, we would not have been able to do anything. Caldwell worked wonderfully with us. Again, we got an option to purchase the property. Interestingly enough, the very same developer who is going to do the Shaw House, Rob Haney out of Terra Nova, is doing an infill development with the McNinch House. And the very same thing is happening there. You're going to have infill development, yes, but also you're going to have an easement placed on the house that will allow its preservation in perpetuity. And I might say something in passing that both of these properties are designated historic landmarks, and we had to have the cooperation of the Historic Landmarks Commission to permit the infill to occur. And they did indeed, after careful review, do that. And we're extremely, extremely grateful to them. The big white house in the snow, that's Edgewood Farm, which is on Eastfield Road. It's in the very northern edges of Charlotte, between Charlotte and Huntersville. And again, by the way, now this house is antebellum. It was a plantation house. You can't even call these houses plantation houses anymore. They give all kinds of names to them, but it was part of the plantation system. Certainly, slavery was part of what this house was about. But what we really try to do in the preservation business is to preserve artifacts. So I've told you before, an artifact is a physical object that tells us something about the past. It's not our job to interpret them. You can say that this fine piece of architecture, beautiful home, shows the vigor and intelligence of these Scots-Irish settlers who came to Mecklenburg County and what they built up. Or you can say, ooh, it was also supported by enslaved people, which is definitely true. So it's not our job to interpret it. It's our job to save it. And it's the very same thing. Infill development, not by Terra Nova, but a man named Matt Sumner, who worked with a local developer and by the name of Nate Bowman to put together an infill development that's going to save the house and put a preservation easement on it. So, and I'll show you a plan of all three of those later. We talked a good bit about the Patterson grocery store. The Patterson grocery store on Booker Avenue, named for Booker T. Washington, in an African-American planned suburb of Washington Heights, was definitely scheduled, or it was definitely on the market. And it's in the front yard of a house. And everybody, practically everybody who had come and talked about it, first thing you want to do is tear it down. Well, again, Preserve Mecklenburg, now we bought this property. We paid money for it. Because if we had not bought it, this building was going to be demolished. It was going to be gone. It's not an historic landmark. The Historic Landmarks Commission couldn't buy it. It's not in a local historic district. The Local Historic District Commission couldn't buy it, but we could buy it. We bought it and we sold it with a preservation covenant on it, and it's going to be preserved.
Do you know what's going to?
Now this house
yet? Do you know?
No, we don't know exactly what the use is going to be. I think they're waiting somewhat for this new unified development ordinance that's coming. How am I doing time-wise? Do you have a feel?
Yeah, even talking over 15 minutes. I didn't start the timer right on time.
Okay.
17 minutes.
Okay, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay.
Good. You're doing good, Dad.
Now this house, now this is a great house. I used to show you some wonderful interior photographs of this period. This is the Mays House, built by a textile executive, the man who basically founded the town that's now Cramerton, North Carolina. This is an elegant, 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 elegant shingle style house in Charlotte. It was, again, a certificate of appropriateness was filed. And the Historic Landmarks Commission again opposed a 1-year delay. I can't get into all the details because I don't have enough time. But the house is going to be preserved because it's in the National Register of Historic Places. It's a local historic landmark. And I give Jack Thompson, who's the director of the Historic Landmarks Commission, who succeeded me, a lot of credit for the fact that this house is going to be saved. We certainly played a part. It has to do with a very intricate selling of development rights and donation of development rights, and it's all too complicated. But the reality is a big developer is going to put up a big development next door, and this house is going to be saved exactly where it is.
Oh, I was going to ask that. So it does not have to be moved. It's going to be preserved exactly where it is.
It does not have to be moved. It's going to stay
Great.
exactly where it is. And, you think about what kind of difference. Preservation is hard work.
Yeah.
But the payoff in terms of satisfaction and in the nature of the city is tremendous. Now, one thing that's very important to understand about Preserve Mecklenburg, we are seeking, in fact, we already are, we are a regional preservation agency.
Mm-hmm.
We seek projects in Mecklenburg, in Gaston, in Lincoln, in Catawba, in Iredell, in Cabarrus, in Union, and in Anson counties. We've been working real hard to get something in Southern Iredell. We've not yet succeeded, but we're working with local planners up there. But we are doing our first project in Anson County. Built in the 1830s, yes, it's another plantation house. Yes, the owners were slaves. And it was the home of very prominent individual that I'm going to spend a little bit of time with later in the program. We're going to buy this house. We're going to buy the house at 5½ acres. Now, let me give all of you good people a good hint. Western Anson County, let me give you a comparison. Approximately 1.08 million people live in Mecklenburg County.
It's a lot.
25,000 people live in Anson County.
What? Is that it?
That's it. 25,000 people. Anson County is going to be directly affected by the Monroe bypass. Mary Dana, you've driven the Monroe bypass.
I have. We drove
You
down.
know what a difference. You know you can get to Polkton in 40 minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't really long.
40?
It took us about 40
Not
minutes.
very long at all. Listen, we're buying this house. Now, admittedly, it needs help. We're going to look at that. We're buying this house at 5½ acres of land for $39,000. Now, you see what you can buy in Mecklenburg County for $39,000. You can't buy a chicken coop
A car.
for $39,000. Maybe you could buy a chicken coop, but I don't know what a chicken coop is. If you want to get ahead of the game and you want to get you some land and you want to get you a deal, the deals are in Western Anson County, Peachland, Polkton, Wadesboro. In fact, it might even be all the way to Lylesville. But I'm going to talk more about this house in a minute, but we are going to buy this house and we have a buyer that we're going to sell it to, and he's going to restore the house. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about these 3 developments that we talked about before. In fact, there's going to be over several of them. On the left, you see this, the red brick house. You see the red brick house that's surrounded by all the white houses.
That's the note.
That is the Knowlton Shaw. Now, there are a lot of people that are going to say, oh, isn't it a shame that it couldn't stay like it was, and it's got all these houses around it.
I heard a lot of people saying that, and that, you know, all the trees will be cut down and things like that.
Well, but here's the thing. Look. Here's the thing. The previous owner, who, by the way, I have no problems with because he worked with us. Everything comes down to owner. He wanted $1.85 million for this property and wouldn't take less. Nobody was going to pay $1,850,000 for that one house. They were not going to do it.
How many acres?
He had tried and tried to sell it.
How many acres of land is
I think it's about 3. It's
Okay.
about 3.
Well, that's why.
But what we were able to do was we were able to basically get a developer to come in, build these houses basically around it, but you still have a full view to the house. You also have, of course, a courtyard effect behind, and you know, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Now, if you think it's important to save this stuff, you've got to permit this kind of infill development to occur. What do you think, Mary Dane?
Well, you know, I'm always going to support what you think, Dad. So.
Well,
So
I mean, you know,
I think
listen,
it was the
you,
only
you,
reasonable
everything.
solution.
You know what preservation is? It's real estate.
Well, that's right.
That's all the heck it is.
Right. Preservation of property.
If it doesn't work economically, it doesn't work. You know. Now here's Edgewood Farm. Now we looked at this before. The one that's up on Eastfield Road. You probably remember this. We've seen this site plan before. The very same thing. See that thing right there? Then boop. See, oh, you can't see it. Can't see my finger.
I can't see your finger.
Yeah. See the house. You see the house.
Yes, the
There it is.
big red
It,
square.
see it right there.
Yes,
See it right there. Can you see my pointer?
I
Uh,
do.
can you see it? Anyway, you can see the amount of land that's being left undeveloped. And there's also a large piece of land back here undeveloped.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to allow this infill development here
Mm-hmm.
because that's what drives the engine. And of course, we looked at the house before, and it's saving. It is basically saving this house with a permanent preservation easement, plus an earlier log house that's behind it. So that's the payoff you basically get.
Mm-hmm.
Now you remember the McNitch house?
Yes, I see the McNeil.
Remember the big colonial revival job?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
There it is. There
Mhm.
it is. There it is. There it is right there. All right, now you see this is on Sharon Lane. Now, here Sharon Lane's down here at the bottom. Okay.
Mhm.
You can see that here's the house. Here's the historic house. Here's what's going to be around it. It's going to look very much like the Knowlton Shaw house. You got me?
Yes.
Okay. So that is the type of infill development you have to do in order to save. And by the way, it's going to be, in my judgment, that is going to be the model that's going to have to be used for so many large pieces of houses on large pieces of land in Charlotte, because there's going to be so much property tax those people have to pay.
Yeah.
And over time, there's going to be more and more of that occurs. Now, see, the thing is, somebody say, well, you're allowed. Well, see, if you've got a permanent easement on this, maybe after you and I are dead, maybe 100 years from now, they'll come in there and tear all the rest of it down, but that baby will stay.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you get as a result. Now, let me talk about this Leonidas Lafayette Polk House in Polkton. Um, this man who is buying this house is a rare find. The house is called, it's a post and beam house, Mary Diana, until the mid 1800s. Nails were real expensive
Mm-hmm.
because they were all handmade.
Mm-hmm.
Now they go around with these guns and just shoot nails. Bam, 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 bam. You see them all these, bang these nails because they're so cheap. Nails used to be very cheap. The type of framing that is used in the vast majority of houses today is what's called balloon framing. And that essentially means that they're put together with nails. I mean, the boards are put together and held together with nails. Now, before nails became inexpensive, they either built log homes or they built what we call post and beam homes or timber frame homes, where you had large beams that were notched into one another.
Okay.
Now, this man, there's some people, boy, it's not me. They just love hands-on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This fella is in his 20s. His name is Austin Kirkland. And Austin Kirkland is going to be buying the Leonidas Lafayette Polk House. Now, for most people, the Polk House is an absolute wreck.
Yeah, I've been.
But also, you see that they think it's an absolute wreck. To Austin, it's an ignored, overlooked, and sort of sad masterpiece.
Yeah.
And he is going to restore it. And he's going to put a tremendous amount of sweat equity into it. And I think it's rather appropriate that both Austin and here is Leonidas Lafayette Polk. Both have beards.
I see that.
Now, how much time do I have, now?
You've been talking about 30 minutes.
Okay, I got enough time. Leon, let me tell you about, I told you about interpretation.
Yes.
Let me tell you about
Yes.
Leonidas Lafayette Polk. In fact, there is a state historic highway marker right outside the house. He was president of the National Farmers Alliance. Now that was a huge. They had over 2.5 million members, farmers all over the country. It was very active in the late 19th century. And he was the president from 1889 to 1892. His name was as well known in the 1889-92 period as Donald Trump or Joe Biden's name is today. He was a nationally known figure. He would be what we would call today a liberal. He was a progressive. He was, for example, in favor of such outlandish things which didn't exist at that time as a graduated tax on income. He was in favor at that time of public support for higher education for females. He was a man who basically was in favor of using government to control private enterprise to help the impoverished. So he was a man way ahead of his time. He was responsible for the publication of a magazine which still exists today called the Progressive Farmer. The emphasis should not be on farmer. It should be on progressive farmer. And it was largely a political tool to try to organize farmers to get active politically and to vote as a bloc in the elections. He was indeed one of the principal figures in bringing about the foundation of the establishment of now what we now call North Carolina State University. There was a so-called land grant system that was passed by a man with a wonderful name. In fact, he's the most famous man in United States history that has my name. His name was Justin Morrill, and he was a senator from Vermont, and he established the land grant system. And Polk believed that farmers shouldn't read Shakespeare and Homer and waste their time at Chapel Hill, where they didn't learn a doggone thing about how to grow turnips. They ought to go to a place that taught them how to be good farmers. And so he was responsible for establishing North Carolina State University. Now, here you see a picture of Leonidas Polk with his 5 daughters. He actually had 6 daughters. One of them died of typhoid fever for this photograph would take. But you can see Leonidas and his wife, who was also from Anson County. And the house that we're buying in Polkton, which was named for this man, the town that he established, he was born there. It's his birthplace. That's what that sign says in front of his house. He was born here. Now, this would be particularly of personal interest to you. He was the man who introduced in the Baptist State Convention the establishment of a Baptist school for higher education for women. which was later named for an early Baptist leader by the name of Meredith. So Meredith College, he was directly responsible for the establishment of Meredith College. You went to Meredith
I
College.
was going to say, I
Now
graduated.
you can say, I mean, what I mean, golly, but his father had slaves. He inherited slaves. He definitely thought that African Americans as a whole were slothful.
Hmm.
Slothful is another word for lazy.
Yeah.
He thought slavery had been a big mistake. He had no problems with it on ethical grounds.
Hmm.
He thought that slavery was unfortunate for the South because it discouraged the immigration of white Europeans to the South. And he thought he was a big, big supporter of immigration of whites to the South. This National Farmers Alliance that he was the president of was for white people only. He was therefore a segregationist. Now, there are people that would say, man, that's what you ought to emphasize. And there would be others who would say, well, you ought to emphasize what he did. My God, this man did unbelievably progressive things. The reality is, and from my perspective, you need to look at the whole story. Now, we are very, very happy that we're going to be able to save. They've been talking about the need to save the Polk House for 50 years, but Preserve Mecklenburg did it. Preserve Mecklenburg works with owners. We seek owners who want to preserve their property. We contact and work with local historic commissions and historical societies. We are particularly in favor of infill projects, and we are committed to building a regional base. And the real glory of Preserve Mecklenburg is in the future, not in the past. So I think Preserve Mecklenburg has done a wonderful job.
It's been a good 2 years. Right.
It's been a good 2 years, and we need people to contact us who are interested in seeing their property preserved, but they want to get their legitimate economic return. I can tell you, a lot of stuff gets torn down that we could save, and we would love to work with them. But I think we've done an amazing job, and I hope I've been fair in presenting what is said. What do you think about Leonidas Lafayette Polk?
Well, I think that what you said was right, which is what I think is that Preserve Mecklenburg is not meant to interpret artifacts. It's meant to preserve artifacts. And that's really, because I'm your daughter, that's what I tend to focus on is, like you were talking about, the construction of the building, and that I tend to look at the building itself, and because of my influence from you, and that it's the artifact itself that matters to me. I honestly don't, sometimes you'll talk about who lived in a place, and I really am looking at the building itself. So, but I think that you guys do great work, and I'm looking forward to what you guys do next.
Well, there are interesting things in the offing, and Mary Dana, I so much appreciate your support and
And
these
I hope,
podcasts and what they've done.
yeah, and we can do, of course, I'm always willing to do more. And I was going to say, everybody who's listening, please email my dad at Dan Morrill, the number 2, and let him know that you're listening to the podcast and enjoying them. And if you'd like to hear more, and of course, let him know if there's buildings that you know of that could be saved, or if you know people, let them know, spread the word, because that's really a lot of it. It's a grassroots effort, really, Dad, isn't it? Spreading the word about Preserve Mecklenburg.
Oh, absolutely. I tell you, everything comes down to the attitude of the owner.
Mm-hmm.
If the owner wants their property to be preserved, but they want to get their fair market price for it, we're the ones to come to. I mean,
Okay.
that's just what it comes down to.
All right. Well, thanks, Dad, and thanks everybody for being with us today.
My blessed thanks everybody for your support, and stay tuned because there will be more things forthcoming. That's for sure.
We'll do some more podcasts, and we always love hearing from everybody. I really enjoyed going to the reception, and we talked to a lot of different people who listen to the podcast and who are excited about Preserve Mecklenburg, and that was fun.
Well, the thing is, I've talked about this before, but the biggest thing you can do is become a member. You can go to preservemec.org, preservemec.org/donate. And for $25, you can become a member, and we would love to have you.
Well, hopefully 2021 will continue to get better. It's been good to see some of the COVID restrictions lifting, and that might change things as well with what Preserve Mecklenburg can do.
Sounds great, Mary Diamond.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye. See you.